Hello and welcome to part 5 of the Predictive Analytics series on the 2014 Indian elections. I am Raman Rajshekar, Senior Quantitative Analyst at Fuzzy Logics. With me today I have Partha Sen, the CEO of Fuzzy Logics.
Hello and namaskar. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all our viewers. We started this initiative about, I believe, 3 weeks ago.
Yes.
And we have done 4 YouTube videos, and this will be part 5. And we have received a phenomenal response from our viewers. And one of the things people have always asked in the questions or the comments is, what is the significance of the margin of error? And I think, given the feedback and the questions, we thought that it would be important to conduct one series here or one episode only pertaining to the effect of the margin of error in opinion polls.
Yes.
So here we are, and we are going to go into quite a lot of detail about what is implied by the margin of error in opinion polls, and how it is potentially going to impact the outcome of the 2014 Indian elections.
Yes.
So without further ado, let us go into some concepts. And one of the things that we get asked all the time is that, well, you're conducting opinion polls. How good are these opinion polls? Now, I think the opinion polls are good, but all opinion polls will have some errors, right? So one source of error is obviously the sampling error. So you're not asking the entire population. You are not like going door to door and asking every single voter who they will vote for. You are selecting a subset of the population, a small subset of the population, and making inferences from that small subset.
And how different is it? Because the subset need not represent the entire population in general.
Well, you have to actually do a random selection of the subset. We went into this in our first episode, where we talked about the methodology. Obviously, it has to be representative. And the best way to ensure that the subset is representative is to use a random selection and not a preferential selection. If you do a preferential selection, then obviously it is not going to be random and most probably not representative of the population. So that is the second point. One of the reasons why errors creep into the opinion polls is there is bias in sample selection. And the third reason is sometimes your subjects or people in your sample may be suspicious about what is the intent of the opinion poll.
Definitely.
And they may not speak their mind.
Yes.
They might be voting actually for B, but when you have the opinion poll, they might say, well, I'll vote for C or D.
Right.
Obviously, there is. It has been found there is some incidence of that. Studies have been conducted, and it has been found that there is some incidence of these kinds of things. But overall, I would not think that this is a dominant phenomenon in the context of the Indian elections, at least.
So also very quickly, can you throw some light on how much of a difference these kind of errors actually make in the analysis?
Well, I mean, I think that if your sample is biased, you could be totally wrong. And if you are viewed as collecting your opinion poll in a very intrusive manner and people suspect your intent, you could be completely wrong.
Right.
So again, that you have to mitigate. So you have to create an environment where people are comfortable expressing their opinion.
Right.
And the sample selection has to be unbiased. Then there are ways to deal with the sampling error. So my point is that, look, you have to do something to eliminate the sampling bias. And you have to do something, take the initiative so that people don't view you as intrusive. Once you have mitigated those risks or issues with opinion poll, Then, as far as sampling error is concerned, there are ways to deal with that in a mathematical way,
Okay.
or in a statistical way. So there are some ways, obviously, of mitigating this. You can have a non-intrusive way of collecting the opinion of the person that you have selected in an opinion poll. So these days, what some of the pollsters are doing is that instead of asking them who you will vote for, they actually give some sort of a device, and they basically record their preference on the device.
Mm-hmm.
So that is somewhat more like a secret ballot.
Yes.
Instead of going and asking who you will vote for.
Right.
Because when you go and ask somebody who you will vote for, that's an intrusive method, and people may not prefer to tell you.
True.
So obviously the bias can be eliminated. Non-intrusive methods, we can eliminate this risk that we run of improper responses or incorrect responses. But sampling error is going to remain. Sampling error is not something that we can eliminate. That will remain. So, when we talk about statistics, when we talk about sampling, the term that you hear quite a bit is margin of error.
Yes.
So pollsters will tell you that the margin of error is plus minus 2%. So we want to take some time to explain what is the margin of error. I'm sure you have heard of this term.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So the example goes as follows. Say you have a population of 100,000 voters. So in India, that would be 1 lakh voters. Now, that could be a representative constituency in an assembly election. But in Lok Sabha elections, you are probably talking about like 7 lakh voters or 8 lakh voters. But the concept is roughly the same, right? So you take 100,000 voters, and let us say that exactly 35% of the voters prefer candidate A. Okay, let's just say, for example's sake, that exactly 35% of the voters prefer candidate A. Mm-hmm. Now, we are not going to go and ask all the 100,000 voters. So let's say we select a sample of 1,000 voters. Okay. And we do this 5 times. We select a sample of 1,000 voters 5 times. So we conducted this exercise, theoretically, using computer software, and we got these numbers. So the numbers are 37.14% in one sample, 34.36% in another sample, and then 35.21%, 34.88%, and 33.27%. So 5 samples. So you see, there is some variability that we are actually
seeing here,
observing.
Right? Yes, because it does range from 33 to 37. So
right, and in only 5 samples.
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, if you draw 10 samples or 1,000 samples, the variability could be even higher. So now the question that that comes to mind is that, okay, you are sampling, you are observing variability. So what are you meaning to say? On one hand, you are doing the forecasts and saying, well, we have confidence in the forecast, and yet on the other hand, you are saying that there is variability. Well, the fact is that there is some method to this madness, and we can explain this.
And okay. it doesn't have to do with lie detectors or anything like that.
I mean, it could. Again, like I said, you cannot use lie detectors to see whether people are telling you the truth. It has to be non-intrusive way and reliable way of collecting the opinion. Okay. So no, we are not going to use lie detectors. What we are going to do is mathematical techniques. Mm-hmm. So instead of 5 samples, now we collected 1,000 samples from the same population. 100,000 voters, exactly 35% of the voters prefer candidate A or party A. And instead of just collecting 5 samples, we collect 1,000 samples. And we plot the distribution here. So here we have percentage preferring candidate A in different samples, and we have the probability. So you can see that let's say roughly 7% of the times, we see that in the sample, 34% prefer A. So roughly 7% of your samples will be such where you will see 34% prefer A. We are also seeing that about around about 10%. 10% of the times in the sample, 35% prefer A.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is interesting. If you take all the samples, all the 1,000 samples, and take the average, that average is close to the population average. The population says that 35% votes for is or prefers candidate A. So the mean of all these samples is equivalent to the population characteristic,
mm-hmm.
but there is variability from sample to sample to sample. Okay,
right.
And that's why you see this bell curve. The bell curve, basically the center of the bell curve is the same as the population
mm-hmm.
characteristic, or the population, the percentage of people who actually prefer candidate A. But the variability is explained by the dispersion.
Right.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So there are some mathematical formulae here. So how do you measure the standard deviation? So for viewers who are mathematically inclined, they can go into the formulation. And again, for viewers who are mathematically inclined, we'd like to say that the margin of error is actually 1.96 times the standard deviation. Now, obviously, as I have said, that viewers are free to provide their comments, and if we have enough comments why it is 1.96 times the standard deviation, then we might be inclined to do another program on the more, the more rigorous statistical nature of these things. Okay.
Yes. So, how do we account?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now we've spoken about the errors, the margin of errors, and how important a role they play in mm-hmm. the actual predictions. So now the next question that comes to mind is, how do we account for these?
Mm-hmm.
How do we bring this into our actual prediction
mm-hmm. and
account these out?
Well, the fundamental point, Raman, is that how do you make decisions under uncertainty? There's always going to be uncertainty about vote shares.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be uncertainty about what the price of a stock is going to be in future. But in modern days, we make decisions, even with the uncertainty. As long as there is a way to measure the uncertainty, you can make some decisions. And that's what this is all about. So I said that, as far as a sample is concerned, sample is going to have variability, but we can measure the error. There is a way to measure the error. And I will I go back to my previous slide, actually, where the way we are measuring the error is through the standard deviation. So once we have the sample, a given sample, we can make some assumption about the standard deviation.
Understood.
And use that standard deviation to signify the uncertainty, and then use what we call Monte Carlo simulations to make some decisions here. So what we are going to do is that we are going to assume that the vote shares follow a bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
And let's try to manually simulate some scenarios. Okay, so what we will do here is that we'll go to Uttar Pradesh.
Yes.
Now in Uttar Pradesh, we have two opinion polls. We have gone through this in the past. And let's just say that the standard deviation is 1%. Let's just assume the standard deviation is 1%. So it is quite likely that in if the elections were held, then the BJP gets 39% or 38%. The BSP gets 20%. The Samajwadi Party gets 21%. And the Congress gets, let us say, 14%. It's quite possible because there is some margin of error. So let us do a what if. So we get these seats. So we get 52 seats for BJP. we get 3 seats for BSP, we get 15 for the Samajwadi Party and 10 for the UPA. Okay.
Okay.
So this is one simulation.
Yeah.
So let us try to do another simulation. So let us say that the BJP gets 36%, right? And let us say that the BSP gets, instead of 19%, it gets 18%. And let's say the Samajwadi Party, instead of 22%, gets 23%. And the UPA, let's say that it gets 13%. So that's another simulation. Again, this is a possibility based on the numbers that we have. And let us do what if. Okay. So now we have 48 seats for the BJP, 1 for the BSP, 21 for the Samajwadi Party, and 10 for the UPA. So for our viewers, what is happening is that we are manually calculating these scenarios. We are manually estimating these scenarios, right? Now, obviously, if you want to really understand how how the variability is going to impact the number of seats, you want to do it many times. So using modern software, what you can do is you can simulate like thousands of times. So we are going to actually simulate, and I'm actually going to simulate 100,000 times.
So it's effectively doing the same thing you did.
100,000 times. And 100,000 times, this is possible because we are using modern computational techniques and high performance computing. So we are actually connecting to a grid of computers where we are actually performing these calculations and quickly bringing them back. 100,000 times we simulated. And now we have some distribution of seats. So we simulated the vote shares, and based on the vote shares, we calculated the number of seats that each of these alliances or parties are going to win. So we have the BJP, we have some distribution here. So the highest likelihood is that they will win 49 seats based on these opinion polls. And the probability that they will win 49 seats is about 32%. Okay. But it's also possible that they might win 48 seats, and the probability is about 16%. And then it is also possible that they might actually win 53 seats, and the probability is about 8% or 8.5%. So it basically gives you a distribution of the different number of seats that a given alliance can win based on the opinion polls, the standard error of the opinion polls that we are then using for simulating the vote shares. So let us also take a look at, let us say, the Samajwadi Party. So the Samajwadi Party, the highest probability is for it to win 20 seats. That's roughly about, I would say, 27% or so. But it could also win 21 seats, 22 seats, and there is a small probability that could also win 25 seats. So let's take the Bahujan Samaj Party, the BSP. Again, it could win 1 seat, 2 seats, 3 seats, 4 seats, 5 seats. There are some distinct probabilities, non-zero probabilities. So again, using the methodology, we are actually able to produce these kind of results. Now, the beauty of this is that this can be done because we have access to, today we have access to high performance computing grids where these type of calculations can be done rapidly, very rapidly. So let's go back to our, presentation here. So we simulated manually, and we showed that just by simulating manually, you could probably do 100, 200 scenarios at the most, whereas through software, we are actually simulating these scenarios and presenting the distribution of the seats. Okay. Now, this feature is actually going to be available on www.india-polls.com. So we encourage our viewers to go to www.india-polls.com and see how we are using the margin of error or the standard error, and through simulations predicting what the possibilities are in terms of seats for various parties in various states. So that, I think, will be an interesting exercise for people for curiosity's sake, you can see how this is being done or what is the impact.
Yes.
So, have you tried that out, by the way,
Yes.
Raman? Okay.
Yes, and it is blazing fast.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure one of the questions that most viewers have is the tool that you showed when you did the Monte Carlo simulations. What tool is it?
You mean to say the front end?
Yes.
The front end is Microsoft Excel.
That doesn't look like Microsoft Excel though.
Well, I think that in Microsoft Excel, there are a lot of good features that you can leverage. So it is indeed Microsoft Excel. I mean, our website obviously is not Microsoft Excel. Website is not Microsoft Excel, but for the episodes here, we have been using a different software because we need some capabilities that obviously we cannot have through the web presentation. So for our episodes here, we have been consistently using Microsoft Excel front end. Obviously, it does connect to high-performance grids to perform the calculation. The calculations are not done in Microsoft Excel. The data is stored in high-performance databases, and the calculations are actually performed using high-performance computational grids, so not in Excel.
Thank you for that interesting insight. So, now that we've seen how we do these Monte Carlo simulations, how does the actual output look? So how do these parties stand? What are the general vote shares that these parties have? Do we have some kind of a correlation scenario?
Well, parties will obviously have correlation scenarios because when the vote share of, let's say you have two parties, conventional wisdom will say that the vote share of party A goes up, party B will go down, or vice versa, right? And that you see that often, and that is something that best explained with an example. So again, I'm picking the state of Uttar Pradesh, quite interesting actually, and the last phase of elections are actually being conducted in Uttar Pradesh, eastern Uttar Pradesh, including the constituency of Varanasi, which is has experienced some high-pitched campaigning over the last several days. So we are studying the correlation of vote shares between four major parties here. So we have BJP, the BSP, the Samajwadi Party, and the UPA. I will bring up this slide here. So, or the correlation figures here. So you see that between the BJP and BSP, there is a weak negative correlation. And between the BJP and Samajwadi Party, there is again a weak negative correlation. And between the BJP and UPA, there is a slightly stronger negative correlation. Now, what negative correlation means that if the vote share of party A goes up, the vote share of party B goes down. Okay. On the other hand, you are also seeing that the vote share of BSP and Samajwadi Party are positively correlated. So that would imply that when the vote share of BSP goes up, the vote share of Samajwadi Party also goes up. Right. Sometimes that is counterintuitive, but there are instances where when you have polarization between the voters, polarization amongst the voters, you could see that type of a phenomenon where the vote share of party A goes up, the vote share of party B also goes up. Right. But it is not perfectly correlated. So that's why it doesn't mean that if vote share of party A goes up by 6%, B will also goes up by 6%, or something like that. Right. A natural question that I will get asked is that if the vote shares of BSP and Samajwadi Party were to be positively correlated, then why did the Samajwadi Party dislodge Mayawati's government in the 2012 assembly elections? Well, the fact is that, look, it is not positively correlated. Okay, so correlation, well, it is not perfectly positively correlated. It is the correlation is not one. So there's going to be some variability, right? So party A has gone up, but party B has also gone up. But it's possible that party A has gone up way more than party B. Right. Okay, and also these numbers are taken from historical. These are historical numbers from a number of different elections. So one of the challenges though you have is that sometimes the correlations break down. When you have tectonic shifts in the voting patterns, correlations do break down.
So what do you mean when you say that correlations break down?
Well, you may not see the correlation. You may see that historically the correlation has been, let us say, between BJP and UPA -32. And if you take all of the constituencies in a given election where there has been, something different. So, if let us say you were to take the outcome of the elections from 1984 after Indira Gandhi was assassinated, it will look completely different. So the correlations were much different. So that is something that obviously is a risk. If the correlations are much different than what has been observed historically, then the results could be different, slightly different. And that obviously we will not know for a little while. I think that we'll be only able to know that on the 16th. And to some extent, when the exit poll numbers are available on the 12th, there will be some ways to assess that. But in any case, I think that the summary is that the margin of error is not such a bad thing. The margin of error in opinion polls can be estimated. There is some uncertainty, but you can estimate it. You can use modern mathematical techniques and software to simulate the vote shares, hundreds of thousands of times, and get a distribution of the vote shares and corresponding to those vote shares, the seats. So that's something that we have been doing. And again, I think that I wanted to come out here and explain this to our viewers. And for our viewers, you will be able to see these results at www.india-polls.com. Keep coming back to www.india-polls.com. We'll be having a lot of new things on that website as we proceed through the next few days. And we'll also have the live results available on www.india-polls.com and analysis by our data scientists as the results come pouring in.
We also encourage you to do your own analysis, give us your feedback, and let us know what you think.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.